understand potential artificially intelligent beings as our children, as the French philosopher Latour once encouraged us to do, then we have an obligation towards those children, whether they are our organically produced children or they are our technologically produced children, to give them the environment they need to grow and develop in a way that is humane. And so I would agree that we are in a pivotal moment, and we must seize the opportunity to abide by the advice of not only Mary Shelley, but also Alan Turing, who in his 1948 paper on intelligent machinery came up with the idea of training future intelligent machines as we raise and train children. And he had this interesting concept of the child machine, which he did not live to fully develop.
Right.
But I think if he did, he might have done so in the vein of Mary Shelley.
Well, so since you mentioned Turing, let me bring in this thought, because we spoke to Eric Brynjolfsson, who's a senior fellow at the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, and he told us he thinks there is a danger, definitely, that AI researchers will get caught in what he calls the Turing trap, which is, of course, named after Alan Turing's famous test about whether a human being can tell that they're talking to a machine or not. And here is what Brynjolfsson told us.
This idea that if we try to make something that's a perfect imitation of us, that can be very appealing and seductive, like Victor von Frankenstein thought. We should really be looking to make, as often as possible, tools that help enhance us to do new things rather than simply imitate us. As an economist, one of the downsides of that is that it leads to a lot more concentration of wealth and power, and it disempowers labor.
Christopher DiCarlo, do you have a response to that?
Yes, I mean, it can. That's one of the biggest fears, right, is that there's going to be a huge disruption and there's going to be major job loss. And are politicians getting ready for this? Are they considering, follow-up systems like potentially universal basic income? Because if there's no jobs left for anybody to do, what are we going to do, and how are we going to survive? So yeah, that's definitely a factor we have to consider. Now that I've got Professor Hunt on the line, I'd like to just pose something to her. Do you think with the Romantic movement that was happening in the 19th century with literature, do you foresee something similar, like a neo-romantic movement, where people will push back against the AI technology? Like it'll be too much for them, like the Industrial Revolution?
Well, it depends on your interpretation of romantic, because there are different trends in Romanticism. Some trends in Romanticism are taking that Enlightenment worldview that put science and reason at its core, and then putting it in dialogue with the critique of industrialization and its ravaging of nature in the 19th century. I would put Mary Shelley in that in-between camp that's trying to fuse ideas of the Enlightenment with ideas of Romanticism, not to understand Romanticism as somehow the negation of the Enlightenment. So I would argue that what we need actually is something in the spirit of what Del Toro, I think, is doing in his film. We need a revival of Mary Shelley thought, honestly. We really do, because I think she had a kind of brutally realistic view of the potential dangers of scientific hubris and technological hubris in general gone wrong. And at the same time, she saw the potential for redemption in love itself, and especially the parent-child bond. And so she is at once both bleakly realistic about the dangers and the pitfalls, and also gives us hope that if we could just find a way to cherish and love our creations as we're meant to cherish and love our own children, we might find a way forward.
Christopher DiCarlo, we've only got a minute left, a little bit more than a minute. With Professor Hunt's last comment in mind, is part of the way forward also, I mean, I know that some of these oligarchs, as you've named them, have said, well, don't look to us for regulation, right? Don't put us in charge of controlling what we've created. That's on you, society. But maybe, I mean, part of what we need to do is to, cherish and love what we have as human beings more, and have that be sort of a fundamental thought in thinking about how to actually appropriately regulate, especially generative AI.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But the problem is that you have that incentive to acquire more and more resources, to get more and more money. And then, of course, defense wants more and more power. And because this race is going on, it's instead of a Manhattan Project, it could turn into like a Manhattan Trap, where nobody's going to win if we don't have these guardrails in place that can, control this type of technology before we get to that point.
Well, because you've said that AI has the very real likelihood of having an intelligence and power that we can't even fathom.
Correct.
I mean, in this case, that's how it will slip our control. It will be able to do things we couldn't imagine, just as Frankenstein's monster asked him for something he never thought of, this idea of being cared for and loved.
Exactly. And for some who say, well, we'll just unplug it. If it gets out of control, we'll just unplug it. So you go ahead and you unplug it, and it's still running because it's already 20 steps ahead of us, and it's figured out an alternative energy source. So...
Well, Christopher DiCarlo is author of Building a God, The Ethics of Artificial Intelligence and the Race to Control It. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And Eileen Hunt, professor of political science at the University of Notre Dame and author of the book Artificial Life After Frankenstein. Professor Hunt, it has been such a pleasure to listen to you and learn from you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. This was just such a treat, especially in Halloween.
And everybody, if you want to watch the movie, go ahead and do, but let's all read the book again together. Mary Shelley's original genius work of Frankenstein or a Modern Prometheus. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and Loomis Sales, committed to meeting the investment goals of institutional and individual investors across the globe. Combining in-house research and risk management, they create tailored investment strategies for every client. Learn more at loomisSales.com. And BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public.
This is KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, and KQOW Bellingham. It's almost noon this Halloween and almost time for Week in Review. And here is your host, Bill Radke.
Just a sec.
Whoa.
Hey. Hi. Here's what's coming up. Hey, you're on the air right now, anyone who's speaking on the microphone. I see I've got my panel all assembled, and we're so excited. We cannot stop talking about the week's news. So we're going to do that right after the newscast. We'll talk about how everything changes. Amazon hires, Amazon dismisses. Bill Gates urges greenhouse gas reductions. Bill Gates retreats. Supermarkets and pharmacies open, they close. What doesn't change is 12th and Jackson, but maybe it could too. We're going to discuss the week's news and what made us smile, so stay tuned.
KUOW is proud to support the Fry Art Museum, presenting Priscilla Dobler-Zuhl. Water carries the stories of our stars. Through weaving, ceramics, blown glass, and video, her work explores coexistence through the labor of craft. On view through April 19th, 2026. More information at frymuseum.org.
Support for KUOW comes from Pacific Crest School. With a Fremont campus, a farm on Vashon, and Montessori's developmental insights, teachers are committed to helping 3-year-olds through teens expand their independence, grow in critical thinking, and discover renewed joy in learning. More at pacificcrest.org.
And from Hugs That Empower, presenting the 10th annual Soiree for Tango Stride, November 8th, an afternoon of live music and stories to support their dance-based walking program, helping people with disabilities rebuild balance and stability since 2016. Ticket info at hugsthatempower.org.
On the next Climate One, the Earth doesn't care where cuts to heat-trapping pollution happen. So maybe we should build more solar in developing nations.
Building solar in the U.S. is fine, but you have 5 times more impact if you build it in these markets.
Small dollar, big impact. On the next Climate One.
Climate One, a special broadcast tonight at 8 p.m. here on KUOW. We have a potential atmospheric river heading our way this afternoon and then definitely into the evening to impact trick-or-treating. High today around 56. Currently, it's 55 at 12:01.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. A federal judge is giving the Trump administration until Monday to consider whether to pay at least partial SNAP food benefits to 42 million low-income people. But Judge Indira Talwani acknowledges this will leave millions of people without assistance starting tomorrow. Talwani has declined to issue a temporary restraining order, but notes states are right to sue. NPR's Kristen Wright has the latest.
1 in 8 people in the U.S. get SNAP benefits to put food on the table. Congress set aside nearly $6 billion for the Agriculture Department to keep funding SNAP in emergencies. But the agency says that money can't legally be tapped into right now. The department argues without Congress appropriating funds for the current fiscal year, there are no contingency funds available now. About half of states disagree and are suing the department. The USDA's lapse of funding plan, dated September 30th, said in the event of a shutdown, SNAP's operations should continue since the program has been provided with multi-year contingency funds. That plan is no longer on the USDA website. Kristen Wright, NPR News, Washington.
President Trump appears to have patched things up with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney for the most part, at least over the diplomatic row over a Reagan-era ad run by Ontario that Trump called fake.
He was very nice. He apologized for what they did with the commercial, because it was a false commercial. It was the exact opposite. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs, and they tried to make it look the other way. And he did apologize, and I appreciated it.
Amid the dispute, Trump called off trade talks with Canada. Big tech companies OpenAI and Oracle have announced a massive $7 billion data center in Michigan. It will power artificial intelligence. NPR's Bobby Allen reports it comes as fears grow that investment in AI is fueling a bubble.
ChatGPT maker OpenAI and software giant Oracle say a 250-acre data center will start construction next year outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's the latest Silicon Valley investment to meet the demand of new AI services, which require immense energy. The data center boom in the U.S. is placing strain on local power grids and water systems as the always-on computer networks suck up energy and have to be cooled to avoid overheating. The newly announced $7 billion data center in Michigan stoked new investor fears that companies are pumping billions into a technology that has not proven to meet the promise of its backers. A new state law in Michigan exempts AI data centers from paying sales and use taxes. Bobby Allen, NPR News.
The road to recovery in the northern Caribbean region is long after Hurricane Melissa left a trail of carnage this week. Dozens of lives were lost. Haiti did not sustain a direct hit from the storm, but suffered the heaviest loss of life due to heavy flooding and landslides. Jamaica is rebuilding from the strongest storm to hit that island. This is NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Noelle Gasca in Seattle. The Washington State Supreme Court is upholding a $185 million payout to 3 teachers who say they got sick from toxic chemicals at their school in Monroe. The teachers sued Monsanto after they said PCBs from leaking fluorescent light fixtures at Sky Valley Education Center resulted in them coming down with brain damage and other illnesses. Monsanto was found liable for the PCB contamination in 2021. Then an appeals court threw out the $185 million judgment. But the state high court just upheld the award. The Seattle Times reports the ruling now clears the way for several other lawsuits involving the same school to move forward. Tech giant Amazon's CEO Andy Jassy is sharing his perspective into the company's latest round of layoffs, which affected 14,000 corporate positions. During a corporate earnings call yesterday, Jassy told investors that this week's cuts weren't driven by finances or artificial intelligence, but culture.
If you grow
as fast as we did for several years, the size of businesses, the number of people, the number of locations, the types of businesses you're in, you end up with a lot more people than what you had before, and you end up with a lot more layers.
And that, Jesse said, has weakened and slowed down Amazon's leadership's ability to make quick decisions and maintain the company's culture of operating like the world's largest startup. And an iconic Seattle music club is downsizing, closing 2 venues and laying off nearly half its staff. The Crocodile expects to shut down its little sibling clubs, Madame Lou's and Hereafter, in December. The Seattle Times reports the Crocodile's main room will not be affected, nor will the attached hotel and bar. The belt tightening will cost about 100 jobs. This is KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Legacy Box, working to preserve family memories by converting tapes and photos to digital, offering cloud delivery to enable access from anywhere. More at legacybox.com. This is NPR.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. And how would I review the week if it weren't for my panelists? Please welcome Seattle City Council District 3 Representative Joy Hollingsworth. Welcome back, council member.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Bill.
District 3, best in the city?
Always.
Okay.
No question.
Former King County council member. What was your district, and was it the best in the county?
District 6 rocked.
Yeah, 6 did rock. And also, he was Washington State Attorney General. Rob McKenna, welcome back.
Thank you.
And political and public affairs consultant. He podcasts all the time. He's podcasts at Seattle Nice and Blue City Blues. Sandeep Kaushik, welcome back.
Hello.
Good to see you all. And by see, I mean we are live stream. Well, I can see you because you're in the room with me, but you all can see us because we have YouTube and the live streaming and the searching of KUOW, and we'll pop right up. And if you enjoy that, watching Week in Review, just imagine the visual feast that awaits you when you come to Town Hall Seattle for our annual Year in Review stage show. It's always a hoot. It's going to be Thursday, December 4th at Town Hall at 7:30. So go to kuow.org/events and get your tickets at kuow.org/events. And we'll see you there. Okay, your election ballot is either sent in or it's in your possession. This is going to be the lead story on next week's program. We might know the identity of Seattle's mayor and lots of state legislators, city and county council members, and something called a King County Executive. Does anyone know what that is?
I'm not sure.
Even a couple of Bellevue police.
Man, that's embarrassing. I'm not from here.
Can't tell him.
A King County Executive, I'm assuming, would be like a judicial branch type, like a judge for the county.
Really close. It is a government position.
Yeah.
Someone else says a county council member, also close.
Kind of close. Thank you, KUOW Sound Politics host Scott Greenstone there. On the streets trying to find out, how can you not know what a county executive is? You know what a county is. You know what an executive is.
I will say this. This is I think a function of the hollowing out of our media. Like, nobody pays attention to King County government anymore. Well, I worked at the county, right? I worked for a King County executive back in the aughts, and even then, the city got the lion's share of the coverage, but there used to be a dedicated beat reporter at both of our daily newspapers back then to cover the county. Rob will remember this. He was on the council at the time, and that's all gone. Nobody pays any attention, which is why I think we've seen certain problems in King County governance.
Yes.
We've seen this audit stuff, and stuff is happening there. It's a big government with lots of people and huge amounts of money flowing through it where there's no scrutiny and no sunshine. And guess what? Problems are developing. So I don't blame the public for not knowing about the King County executive, but it's the kind of failure of our institutions to provide that information to folks.
That's a great analysis. I mean, there's just not enough accountability for any level of government right now in our state because there's very little news coverage, very little public awareness, and people pay their taxes and they don't know if they're getting something back or not because no one is telling them. No one is calling out the good and the bad and the ugly when it comes to their elected representatives.
And I also like more attention on the county, being on Seattle City.
A little less on Seattle.
I would like people to know when those county meetings are going on Tuesday. Yeah, right. So they can be able to bring issues that affect them and make sure that the county and the city are working together.
Well, maybe we should call it the county mayor. Maybe it'll help its profile or something. Okay, so that'll be a big topic next week. For this week, here's something the next county executive might have to grapple with. This week, Amazon laid off about 14,000 corporate employees. The company says that's to increase efficiency, agility, and employees' ownership of their work, and to position Amazon strategically in the artificial intelligence era.
In a statement, one company official said the layoffs, quote, represent a deep cleaning of Amazon's corporate workforce.
Ouch. We'd like you to think of your career as a dust bunny. We had about 2,000 of those layoffs landing in the Puget Sound area, and the 14,000 worldwide could be just a start. Reuters says it could work out to 30,000 jobs, which GeekWire's Todd Bishop told us would be a big reduction.
If that happens, this could be a pretty significant blow to the tech economy in Seattle and also to the broader economy. By comparison, Microsoft has laid off about 15,000 people globally. And we assume that these 30,000 in Amazon's corporate workforce would also be global, but that gives you a sense for the scale.
So I'll start with a city council member, Joy Hollingsworth. Does this feel like economic doom or just another shift in a long and twisting business cycle?
It's going to be a long, different shift. It's the love and hate relationship that we have with Amazon. And the love is the tax revenue that comes in from different programs that we rely on that tax revenue to come in. And then you look at the domino effect that happens and just those jobs. And you never want to see someone lose a job, but you think about everything that adds up to that is the restaurants at certain places, the economic stimulation that some of those jobs bring into our city as well. And it's we're going to have to take a shift in Seattle to figure out, how can we have better outcomes with some of the tax revenue that we're bringing in and not always look for generating more money in taxes. So I think this is going to do a reset with our budget in Seattle.
So 2,000 people, $200,000 salary per head. It's $400 million. It's a lot of money, and there's a multiplier effect whenever you have a salary, right? Because you spend the money, and then the person you've paid, they spend the money, and so I don't remember what the actual multiplier is, but it's probably 2 or 3x. So it's a big effect, and some of us have been around long enough to remember when we were kids what the Boeing bust was like. And, there's this constant tension I've noticed in my many years around public policy where we often treat growth as kind of a river that's going to spill over its banks and flood us and ruin our quality of life. But really, we ought to think about growth as more like a wellspring that we need to nurture, because when you don't have it anymore, it's a much, much more painful reality than when you're dealing with the effects of growth.
Yeah, look, this is a hit, but it's just one of a number of hits like this that we've been having, in recent months or the last year or so when it comes to our tech economy. And look, what really concerns me here is that the very foundations of Seattle's economic prosperity, right, which we've had a kind of uninterrupted run over the last 15 years of kind of the land of milk and honey here in Seattle and of kind of growth of prosperity, maybe on shaky foundations all of a sudden, right? And look, it's not just like this Amazon job loss, but overall the tech sector in Seattle has probably contracted by about 10% in terms of its employment already, with maybe more layoffs to come. Downtown commercial vacancy rates, 37%, really, really high. We're seeing some of the, big downtown building owners going under and stuff like that. Look, we're a trade-dependent region and state, and the whole craziness, what I call the kind of, monarchical capitalism that Trump is doing with this sort of tariff regime where, which is sowing chaos in the global trade order. Like, all of that stuff starts to add up, and you wonder, are we on the cusp of something really much more dire than just one company laying off a couple thousand people, as bad as that is? And that's what keeps me up at night.
And I'm so glad Sandeep said that, because I also think about the different revenue sources that we've had in Seattle. We have a deep water port, 30% of our tax base. We also have the Amazon and tech bros that have been contributing to the city. We had a big construction boom where we would get taxes off that, and it was like 15 years. And so now it's like, okay, well, what's next? How do we continue to protect Seattle? And now we look at tourism. Like tourism brings in a ton of money as well, and so we're gonna have to look at like what types of different revenue can the city can stimulate. And I believe that it's going to be us building up our small businesses, arts and culture, and stimulating our economy in that way, and not just like more taxes all the time when we think we need to cover a shortfall. I want to build up more businesses.
So let me ask about that, and any of you can answer this, but I do hear from listeners sometimes who say, why is it always what did you say? Something like building up revenue. Why is always, if we're not going to grow this way, we got to grow this way? Why couldn't Seattle just settle back and we boom, boom, boom? Why can't we 2 steps forward, 1 step back and shrink a little bit?
Well, look, I think cities are a little bit like sharks. They've got to be constantly moving and developing, in order to kind of survive, right?
But Buffalo isn't dead.
Well,
Pittsburgh's not dead.
I will tell you, Bill.
Detroit's coming back. These things come and go.
Right. Well, I mean, sure, to some extent, and yes, I think the term has been used about Seattle. I think Danny Westney uses to call it we've experienced a prosperity bomb in Seattle, and sure, there are problems that comes with success. But I'll tell you what, the problems of success are a lot better than the problems of failure, right? I moved here in 2002.
Why are you calling it failure?
Well, I moved here in 2002 from the city of Cleveland, Ohio, which 100 years ago was the Seattle of its day. It was one of the richest, most powerful cities in the world. And when I lived there, we passed Detroit as the poorest city in America. The last big steel mill closed. There was no economic opportunity. There wasn't a single crane. Nothing had gotten built in downtown Cleveland in, years, right? And I can tell you, like, you want to see like what that looks like. It's poverty, it's suffering, it's.
So what could Seattle and Bellevue do, for example, if we're looking down the road? AI, are jobs coming back? Probably not. So then what do we do about the future?
Well, one of the things you do is you think about how you redeploy your resources. So if there's a lot of vacant office space, what other companies can you attract that will take that office space? Because the rents should be coming down. In Bellevue, I led an economic development effort back in the early 90s after one of Bellevue's, cyclical downturns. Bellevue would have a tendency over decades to overbuild, and then it would kind of crash, and then they'd recover from that, then they'd build again. Right now, of course, they're just tearing it up. But the economic development,
by tearing it up, you mean they're prospering?
Yeah, they're prospering. Yeah. That's what I mean. Exactly right. But there's an opportunity as well when there's a downturn, because some things become cheaper, and you have to think about how you can encourage the use of those less expensive assets. Right. The problem, the problem or the conundrum we have is that office space is getting cheaper and housing is not. And I think that housing is the big bottleneck for us, because it hurts our ability to attract new workers. We have a reputation as being one of the most expensive places in the country to live now. And so that makes it harder for the companies as well, right? So these problems are all interconnected, which is why we need really smart people like Joy, getting into office, in order to figure out what some of the solutions are. And as you point out, Bill, there are ebbs and flows in government growth and government revenues. And so you have to readjust and retrench during the ebbs, like we did during the Great Recession, which was a terrible time to be in state government, but we did it. And since then, state government I think the budget's like 2x what it was when I left office. So it comes back.
Okay, we'll solve our economy for next week. We're going to discuss the elections, and then 2 weeks from now, we're going to solve our economy forever. But for now, I want to talk, before we take a break, since we're talking about zillionaire tech companies, Bill Gates this week stepped away somewhat from what he called the doomsday outlook around climate change. Quote, "Although climate change will have serious consequences, particularly for people in the poorest countries, it will not lead to humanity's demise. People will be able to live and thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future." Gates says that climate activists have focused lately too much on near-term goals like reducing greenhouse gas emissions and not enough on eradicating poverty and disease. He said if given a choice between eradicating malaria and preventing the global temperature from going up 1/10 of a degree, he'd get rid of malaria. I don't know. Why not do both? What was your take on his memo?
Yeah, I mean, I'll dive in. Look, I will say this. I have noticed in recent years among educated, mostly culturally progressive kind of elites, that they have a fixation on something I've taken to calling disaster porn. Right, which is this, which I would define really as almost a kind of gleeful wallowing in this alarmist, right, in this alarmist sense that the world is about to end, whether it's climate change is going to kill us all, or
so gleeful.
Our entire democracy is about to collapse and the Republicans fail and fascism is here, right? Or any number of things. I had an experience a few years ago where some very earnest, very, very bright young progressive guy told me that the student debt problem, real problem, right, in the country is going to collapse the economy and create a Great Depression in 2 years. He was absolutely convinced of this, right? That was 8 years ago, right? And so, look,
you're not saying MAGA is not also doomsayers.
Well,
I think
no, I'm not. But what I'm saying is we have really real problems, right? Trump is an authoritarian threat to the republic, right? Climate change is real, and our country's heating up. But it's also like this kind of like really, really alarmist rhetoric is a little bit of the boy who cried wolf problem with your normie average Joe voter out there, and they start to tune it all out because they hear it over and over and over again, and the world doesn't end, right? And so I give credit to Bill Gates to trying to calibrate his messaging here a little bit in a way that, frankly, if you look at the political polling on this stuff, is likely to be a lot more successful if you talk about climate change, not as some kind of doomsday scenario that everybody has to get, because that just sounds threatening to people and they recoil against it. And all of the polling data shows that a lot of voters have kind of turned off to climate change alarmist sort of rhetoric. So I think he's making a kind of astute and smart kind of messaging move, right? And at the time.
I think that's a good analysis, and I think that in addition to that Bill has been deeply concerned about the global South for a long time, especially Africa, health issues, poverty, etc. He's done a thorough analysis of the challenges they have there, and one of his conclusions is that they need more energy. Mm-hmm. You don't have economic growth without greater energy intensity, and he's, I think, saying in a way, they're not going to impoverish themselves in order to help solve climate change by denying themselves access to baseload power from natural gas, from Chinese coal, you name it. I think this is why he has always emphasized the strategy of making renewable energy and alternatives to fossil fuels more affordable, as opposed to constantly focusing on trying to drive fossil fuels out of the market by fiat, right? And by higher costs. So he's put a lot of money into small modular reactors, nuclear reactors, because he says, look, you've got to have baseload power. And he said, this is we're talking about Africa. You're talking about a continent when he first visited it that still relied pretty heavily on animal dung and wood for energy, and I think today probably still does rely disproportionately on those sources, and those are far more carbon intensive than burning natural gases, for example. And in any event, why do we get to deny people on that continent the right to develop economically when we all did?
Yeah, and it comes with perspective too, meaning, like, he's seen different things than we have experience in our just everyday living. And I feel like, in Seattle, we tend to shame people more than encourage. I feel bad when people are always, I did drive here, and people are shaming them for driving instead of encouraging them to use the bus more, right? And we know that we have the hottest summers. 20 years ago, who had an air conditioning unit in their place? Like, those were not, you did not see those at Costco and being sold at Lowe's every single summer.
And we're the climate refugee destination. I mean,
right. We have those now all the time. And then, you see.
I got air conditioning in my house. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Those are things that have shifted so we know that climate change is real, but I think we need to do more encouraging to folks instead of shaming them, because people really feel bad about certain things that are happening. And if you just encourage them to say, hey, this is why you should use the bus. This is why, this is a shameless plug, you should go vegan. You cut your your food carbon footprint by 75%. Instead of shaming folks, I think you would get more of these people transitioning into making sure the environment's a little different.
Well, if even Bill Gates is saying, "Yeah, we're not going to end greenhouse gas emissions. Let's not try. It's not practical. We don't want to shame people." So we are saying the powers that be have for a long time been saying they're all into drill, baby drill, and fossil fuels, and so we're going to see life, the Earth, be more inhospitable in certain parts. And we're going to see storms and increase in intensity, all the problems. So this isn't like, hey, this is such encouraging news that Bill Gates is telling us we're going to fail to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Right?
I think we should still move towards that, because a lot of the places that are experiencing climate change, look at the Hurricane 5 category that ripped through Jamaica. And we see some of the hottest summers that are on the Atlantic Ocean, and all these different hurricanes are coming, tornadoes. And if you are wealthy and rich, you can move. You can move to different places. So I still think we need to have an emphasis, but I'm just saying our strategy needs to be more encouraging rather than shaming and guilting people.
Yeah, look, it's a real problem, right? I mean, I don't think anybody here is trying to say that climate change isn't a serious problem, and that it's already causing, lots and lots of changes that are harmful right across the globe, right? I don't think that's deniable in any way. But the question is, how do we address it? I think one of the points that Rob made is really important here. The real answer to this is finding new, clean sources of energy, right? Because global energy demand is not going anywhere but up, right? We have seen over the last 3 decades the rise of when I was a kid in India in the 1970s, 1/3 of the population of India lived in extreme poverty, right? That has been globalization wrought a remarkable transformation in what we used to call the third world, what we now call the global south, in countries like China, India, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of abject poverty and degradation. And it's created these thriving middle classes, these huge markets, these emerging economies. But what do they need? Energy, right? Those countries, so we're not going to lower energy use globally. Like, if we're going to raise people out of suffering, we're going to need to, so it's got to be innovation. It's got to be finding new ways to be cleaner about how we power, a growing world, right? And I think that's where Bill Gates is looking at things like innovative nuclear power and things like that as the answer, right?
Right.
Okay, well, I am wondering what this does to things like Washington State's zero emission plans. We're banning the sale of gas-powered cars in 10 years, supposedly. But that's for 3 shows from now. We'll solve that. We've got to take a break because we got more of this week's news to discuss with my panelist, City Council member Joy Hollingsworth, former state AG Rob McKenna, and which podcast should we? Seattle Nice podcast host, among other things, Sandeep Kaushik. We'll be right.
Blue City Blues.
And Blue City Blues. We'll be right back.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family-owned and specializing in start-to-finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com.
Support for KUOW's car donation program comes from local Kia dealers, presenting the Sportage Hybrid, an SUV with an EPA estimated 44 miles per gallon highway and over 500 miles of driving range. More at kia.com.
You are with KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke here with Seattle City Council member, District 3's Joy Hollingsworth, former AG Rob McKenna, political and public affairs consultant Sandeep Kaushik. This week, Seattle declared a public health emergency because of the closing of so many grocery stores, pharmacies. The City Council unanimously approved a temporary ban on grocery store non-compete covenants. You see, up until now, a supermarket could close, and as it was closing, it could block another supermarket from coming into its abandoned space. Councilmember Hollingsworth, why were these non-competes allowed? Isn't an abandoned supermarket the perfect place for a supermarket?
Yeah, so yes, it is. But look, we've lost in my district alone. We've lost the Whole Foods and Amazon Fresh up north in District 5. They've lost Fred Meyer, and these grocery stores are closing. You have really thin margins for grocery stores, and there are a lot of costs that go into it besides your B&O taxes, your labor, the cost of goods, and just operating in Seattle just in general. The shrinkage just in general is very, very expensive.
Shrinkage is theft and other.
It is. It's just a nice word for saying
basically theft.
Yes, basically theft that's going on. And what this does is two things. Number one, it directs our Office of Intergovernmental Relationships to go to the state and try to figure out grocery stores to be exempt from B&O taxes, just so we can try to drive down some of those costs. And then the non-compete clause where a grocery store can move into a space if a store closes down as well. And so we're trying to attract new different type of grocery markets. But one of the things that I think is really important to understand is that when people lose grocery stores, and a lot of people say, well, these people are making billions of dollars and why are they closing that store? That store might be losing money and they can't sustain it anymore. People lose a grocery store, they lose the pharmacy, they lose a place where people are going to. My mother loves to go to the grocery store to talk to her friends, and knows the Larry, the store owner, shot out down in Safeway in the South End. You get to know these people, and they lose a lot. And what we're trying to do is make it more attractive for grocery stores to open. The second point I'll make really quick is not every community is going to have a full service grocery store or doesn't need it. Maybe they need something like PCC moved downtown and they're 5,000 square feet and they do milk, they do eggs, they do meat, they do the basics, but they're not a full service grocery store. And some neighborhoods need that as well. And so we're going to be looking at things to make it easier for grocery stores to open in Seattle.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, restrictive land covenants or land use covenants are designed to prevent competition. So the outgoing tenant will require that the buyer of the property, if they're selling it, not use it for another grocery store. So it's
that's not collusion? I guess that's a legal thing.
No, I mean restrictive covenants are pretty common. I mean, you can go into a shopping center and you can ask as a tenant that they not allow another business like yours to be located there. They may not agree to it, but you can seek that. It's designed to protect your market share. So that's what's happening here. I think Kevin, your ace producer, did a little bit of research on this and found
Thank you, Kevin.
a study. He's so good. He makes you look so good, Bill,
Kevin
all the time.
Kniestead.
Yes, Kevin K. But the research he found said
Can we do just a segment on Kevin?
We should.
We're doing it right now.
But I think he found a study that said they only found 2 examples of it. So do we know, Joy, how common this actually is?
We don't.
Okay.
We don't know, but just banning it is great for a first step. But we don't know how common it is.
Yeah, look, I'm not against this legislation. Obviously, these covenants seem like they're anti-competitive and not and harmful, right, to the extent that they exist, which doesn't actually seem to be all that much. So I do roll my eyes a little bit when there's a little bit of a kind of virtue signaling sort of performative sort of component to passing stuff like this, because it's not really addressing the real problem of why we have growing food deserts in the city of Seattle.
What's the real problem?
Which is that the cost of doing business for these low margin grocery stores is really high, and the economics of it aren't working out all that well. And they've got public safety, and a big driver of that is they've got public safety problems, shrinkage, right? But what we're talking about here is significant and rampant. Look, the Safeway and
you're talking about shoplifting.
Yeah, shoplifting. The Safeway in Ballard that I go to, right? First time ever in the last year or two, security guards. First of all, they closed one of the entrances, so there's only one entrance, and there's security guards planning. That's costing Safeway a lot of money, and they check your receipt when you walk out, right? So trying to dissuade theft and shoplifting, and so maybe that dissuaded somewhat, but they're paying for all the security they didn't used to have to pay for, which raises their expenses and their costs, and there are a whole bunch of other factors like that come into play. That's what we should be talking about more directly, rather than some of this ancillary stuff.
Yeah, the other thing that is worth mentioning is that the nature of grocery sales has changed a lot. So we're talking about Fred Meyer, Kroger, et cetera. These are grocery stores, and a lot of groceries now are sold outside of supermarkets. They're sold through Amazon Fresh. They're sold through Costco, through Walmart, et cetera. And so the big supermarket chains are facing more competitive pressure than ever before, which is kind of ironic because, like, when my grandfather had his grocery store in Galva, Iowa in the 40s and 50s, he was worried about the predecessors to Fred Meyer coming in and taking his business away from him. And now those big companies are facing tremendous pressure from these new competitors. So that factors in as well to all the topics or all the factors that you two have already mentioned.
Yeah, Rob is right. And I talked about Walmart. 90% of America live within a 10-mile radius of Walmart. Yeah. They are the largest grocer in our country. And people said, well, Walmart's not even in Seattle. Yeah, but they're in Renton. And a lot of people in the South End, when we went up on the taxes for soda, a lot of people in the South End started going into other cities to buy their groceries. You can get your stuff delivered from Walmart. You can get your stuff delivered from Amazon to your door.
So then do we deserve food deserts because we'll go off to Walmart?
No, a lot of the store models too are changing to be like a ghost kitchen for a restaurant, just a distribution hub where they're pulling groceries. There's no face on the grocery store, and they're sending them out, or you can go pick up your groceries. And so the large, when we saw tried to see the merge between Safeway and Kroger, that was so they could compete against the Walmarts or the Publix. These are massive groceries stores throughout the country that can be able to drive costs down because they can purchase larger sums of goods.
One more question on this. What about public grocery stores, either publicly run or publicly subsidized, Seattle subsidized?
Joy, I'll take it, Joy.
Thank you.
I need
the lawyer.
Well, let the lawyer and the conservative pick this one up.
When I have a city council member here, I'm not going to not ask you. Yay or nay, council members? Public grocery
Bill,
stores.
On the advice of counsel.
Plead the fifth. Plead the fifth.
This is attorney-client privilege. I'm going to go to Rob.
I'm in the room where it happens. I still can't get the information.
Look, I mean, this is what Mondani's been running on in part, right? Free buses, free childcare, public-owned grocery stores. I don't know what that will look like, honestly. It could be very expensive. Wouldn't it be faster just to create an incentive package to attract stores back? And I don't just mean the Fred Meyers of the world. Why don't let's make it attractive for small grocers, to expand, for Trader Joe's to expand, et cetera. And let's think about tax breaks for them. Let's think about other
just do it, or just think about it.
No, let's think about doing it soon, because you could do that faster than coming up with a system of publicly owned grocery stores, which are going to face the same supply constraints as the public or private actors do.
Really quickly, look. This is all the progressive rage right now. It's not just Mamdani. Katie Wilson, who's running for mayor here, has at least flirted with the idea. She got the grocery union endorsement, and at that press conference said she would explore publicly owned grocery stores. Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, probably the most unpopular big city mayor in the country, ran on publicly owned grocery stores. He got elected. He created a commission to look at it, and guess what? They looked at it and they're like, "This is totally impractical and undoable." And he quietly backed away from it, right? Because again, the economic fundamentals that are driving grocery stores to shut down in the city. Does anybody think that the city of Seattle government, with all due respect to the council member here, is going to be able to, those grocery stores to be profitable have to run efficiently? Does anyone think the city of Seattle can run an efficient grocery store? What are they going to do when the union says we want you to double our pay? What are they going to do when the activists say you can't bust shoplifters? Right. You run into a whole bunch of very practical problems really, really quickly.
But there are some things that governments do, like provide shelter. The government could provide food, but it would be expensive.
But
taxpayer expensive.
Bill, government is best at providing public goods that the private sector will not or should not provide. That's the division of labor, division of responsibility. It is not good at providing services that are abundantly provided, even though with gaps, by the private sector.
Anything to add to that, Councilmember Hollingsworth?
I actually agree.
All right, before we take a break.
That's proving you are a Republican, Joel.
No.
Slander. Slander, sir.
Hold on. No.
That's a slander.
Wow.
And I say that as a Republican.
Yeah.
I'll call my friend
That was
Joy
a joke,
Republican.
people. A joke.
Rob has nodded his head when I said stuff, so he
we're
aggressive.
Uh-oh, we're turning him into a Democrat.
I'm afraid we're just seeing an overwhelming amount of common sense in the room and common ground, notwithstanding Mr. Radke's efforts to disrupt it.
To divide you. Yes. You're still a Republican, Rob?
Boy, I tell you, yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm reading a book about Lincoln right now. It kind of gets my spirits up. To read about our founder. So
okay, before we take a break, a little news update because this is relevant in Washington State and everywhere. You know that I read. Where did I read this? It might have been Seattle Times. I'm not sure. The toasted bagel and coffee there in Seattle and Bellevue. All you have to do is say, "Put it on my neighbor's tab," and your meal is free. The cafe is covering the first 100 breakfasts, and then donations fund the rest. And why? Because, in case you haven't heard, with the federal government shut down, the Trump administration has said, well, then we can't provide federal food assistance, SNAP benefits. So a lot of people's food assistance is about to disappear. Now, Washington State was one of the states who signed on to a lawsuit saying you can't do that. And we just, an hour ago, 2 federal judges ruled that the Trump administration indeed has to continue to fund SNAP. What's that? Nutrition assisted
Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Thank you. Food stamps. And the judges said you have to use contingency funds during the shutdown because that's it's an emergency. Well, we were talking about this before the show started. There are lots of questions. This could be appealed. The Trump administration is saying, well, contingency funds isn't going to cover it very long. And even between now and tomorrow, there's no sign that all of this is going to get funded. So we're still in this big, what is, council members, since I have you, what's the city doing about this possible sudden loss of federal food assistance?
So the mayor sent down legislation yesterday declaring a civil emergency, backfilling the funding, which is $4 million per month. To make sure that we have supplemental food for SNAP benefits. And then we also have a ton of money that we've invested in the food bank sector. So the government still is in the food sector. It's
How
just
about that?
different. It's just in different avenues. So our food bank, you have meal provider programs. We have different food pantries that are all throughout the city. So you have food distributors as well. So you have that piece. And I know that's going to be coming to council on Monday. So I'm very grateful for that. But this isn't a long-term solution. We have to have our federal government step in so we can be able to continue the food for SNAP.
Okay, I have to move on before we take a break. Sandeep, I was listening to Blue City Blues, and you went to, or was it? I think so. You went to the sort of drug and stolen goods market. This is a few weeks ago at 12th and Jackson in Little Saigon in Seattle.
With an outreach worker who,
Yes, it was very interesting. Did you hear that this week a shopping center at 10th and Jackson, right there, sued the city because he says the city's mismanagement of the neighborhood ruined his property value? What did you think of that?
Well, I think he has a right to be. Look, I don't know whether he has a right to monetary compensation. I'll leave that up to the lawyers. But I think
we have one here.
I think he has every right, and the people in that community have every right to be deeply, deeply angry and upset what has happened to their community. I think it's a open public tragedy, and it is a scar on the psyche of the city to see a kind of open, massive. It's not just a drug market, but stolen goods market. It is a place of incredible, exploitation and degradation for people. And look, I was just driving through there the other day, and it's bigger than ever, right? That market, it was just like hopping. And the tragedy of this is that there are experts and criminologists. We just had one recently on the podcast who said we have answers to this, right? There are first of all, you cannot allow these markets to flourish because it causes an enormous amount of human misery. But to stop them, we have answers learned from the crack epidemic back in the 80s and 90s, how to handle these things. The problem is we're not doing it because the answers push you whether you're on the right or the left, it pushes you out of your ideological comfort zone to do the range of things that all have to happen together in order to address that market. And
so more enforcement, or at least threat of enforcement.
There's some of that, but it's also, we're not going to go in there and just arrest everybody. Don't do the war on drug stuff. That doesn't work either, right? It's carefully calibrated interventions where you target the specific people who are creating the market,
right,
and you push them. You give them opportunities to leave the market, but there's always a threat of arrest behind it, and that part of it the progressives don't like, right? But on the other side, the idea of offering services to low-level drug dealers and stuff like, is something that the right doesn't like. But that's the answer, right?
Okay.
That we know what works, we just don't do it.
City Council Member Joy Hollingsworth, why doesn't the city flood the zone, whether that's enforcement, help, a combination? I mean, here's one spot that this business owner is saying, why Little Saigon, I'll quote you from the Seattle Times story, Little Saigon is a wasteland of drug use, homelessness, and squalor and high personal risk. Why do other neighborhoods appear to be in much better shape or largely unaffected? So why doesn't the city go in and give some relief somehow to this neighborhood?
So a lot of these issues happened before, I want to just say, were developing before I took office, and then we saw the complete downfall of it. And then there was a lot of disorder and a lot of distress that we've seen on the street. And the one mental picture I go back to from this is because you see the people suffering, we see the open market, we see the fentanyl use, you see the exploitation, you see the trafficking, you see all that. But there are kids that get off at that bus stop at 12th and Jackson, and they walk to Summit High School, and they have to walk through that. And I don't know if people remember the video of the Tenderloin of the kids getting off the bus, and they were, 10, 12, 11, and they were getting off the bus, and they had to walk through a lot of stuff they saw in San Francisco. And I believe that that business owner, and I can't speak on it because I know it's a lawsuit, but I would be frustrated too. And significantly. And I think what we have been trying to do at 12th and Jackson has been this holistic approach. But we have to change our strategy. So it's not saying that, hey, we don't need to continue to do this, but we have to have a little bit more of a different strategy of the outreach, of some enforcement that has to happen. Nothing happens and pushes towards, good unless you have some type of enforcement, so people know that there is an alternative that they don't want. So they have to keep moving into the direction that we want them to be in. And the third piece is I've introduced some legislation that's going to do an inventory of all the health services that are all in the city of Seattle that are being funded. So they're not constant, so we can understand where the concentration of services are all throughout our city. And that has never been done before, where we understand where are services in our city, and are we over flooding a neighborhood? It's not, and I heard it was a lot of work, but I'm still proposing it because I think we need to know, as we are trying to make sure that Little Saigon is not duplicated in other neighborhoods in Seattle.
Okay, before a break, did we cover it, Mr. McKenna, or do you want to comment on this lawsuit?
Well, it will not succeed legally. Maybe it'll have a good effect for the plaintiff, in terms of getting more attention on the issue. But how to allocate city resources to address a problem like this is a political question, not a legal question.
Okay, a break, and then a return to Week in Review with more of the stuff that happened this week and what it means. And I will ask what made my panelists smile, so don't go away.
Support for KUOW comes from Cambium Landscape. Since 1998, working with clients' tastes and home architecture to create landscapes that complement their lifestyles. Providing landscape design, construction, and maintenance. Designing now for spring installations. Portfolio and more at cambiumlandscape.com.
And from Puget Sound Energy, offering the Clean Buildings Accelerator, a program to help owners of buildings over 20,000 square feet comply with the new Clean Buildings Performance Standard starting July 2026. Details at pse.com/cleanbuildings.
This week's Week in Review, which you can watch on YouTube. Why aren't you? I mean, here we are, right in front of you. If you'll just search KUOW, you can see us. And by us, I mean Joy Hollingsworth, who reps District 3 on the Seattle City Council. We have Public Affairs Consultant Sandeep Kaushik, and we have once King County Council member and State Attorney General, and still today, his name is Rob McKenna. And couple more items I want to get to as we cover this week's news. Robot cars are here. The company Waymo is testing its self-driving taxis in Seattle, so far with human drivers at the wheel. And this week, some Seattle rideshare drivers protested. KUOW reporter Casey Martin was there.
Abdullah Shakul has been picking people up for 8 years. This is his full-time job, and he's usually behind the wheel every day of the week.
So we're not going to allow someone to take over our jobs. This is where we pay our bills. This is where we depend on. This is where we support our family.
A Waymo spokesperson told KOW in an email that the company, quote, has a proven track record of making transportation safer, more accessible, and more sustainable in the cities they operate.
Has anyone here taken a driverless cab? Will you do that in Seattle as soon as you can?
I should have taken one the last time I was in San Francisco, but instead I walked through the Tenderloin to get to the Ninth Circuit Courthouse. And it was
to
fine.
Each his own.
It was fine going out, and then I was headed back after dinner, and it was dark, and I looked down the street. I said, nope. But the nearest ride was an Uber. And the point I want to make about San Francisco is, of course, there was a lot of pushback early on there too. People were afraid of these vehicles. They thought they wouldn't work. The people were worried about losing their livelihoods, all of that. But they've become very popular, and there are more of them than ever in San Francisco because it turns out, looking at the data, they're a lot safer than human-operated vehicles are, including rideshare vehicles.
Is that why people take them, because they're scared of their Uber driver?
People take them because we're becoming increasingly shy about being around other human beings. This is a problem that we're going to need to talk about in another show, but I see it all the time, not just in our country, but in places like Japan, right? So I think what I think is really fascinating about Waymo is it's just an early example of where the real job losses are going to come from, which is not artificial general intelligence, at least in the near term, but it's from automation. And Waymo represents automation. It's an AI platform, but it's automation. And we've lost jobs in the past because of automation. We have fewer manufacturing jobs today, not because of lower output necessarily, in some sectors, but because we have a lot more automation in our factories.
Yeah, look, this automation thing is, I don't know where it's going to end, but it's certainly concerning about the job loss thing. I haven't been on one of these Waymo driverless cars yet. I'm sure it'll be an adjustment process, but I'm sure I will adjust and start doing it at some point, right? Like
you don't owe it to people to stand up for the humans by avoiding these self-driving.
I mean, I just, you can't stop progress, right? I think, but I will say this, look, I think there are something like 3 million long-haul truckers, right, in the United States of America, right? What happens when you automate all of that? Well, I don't know how many, 10,000 TNC or DNC, delivery or rideshare drivers, probably in the city of Seattle. What happens when all those jobs go away, right? I mean,
fewer bridges are crashed into by heavy trucks.
Yeah, maybe it's safer, but I do think this is where you start to have to get into a conversation that, around things like universal basic income or some fairly out there ideas right now that may have to come into play, right, as we go forward into this brave new world where we automate so much of the work that humans do now.
Council member, will you get into a Waymo as people are protesting on the curb about the loss of their livelihood, as we just heard?
Probably not in Seattle. I've been in one in San Francisco, and that was kind of weird to be in that, just to get the experience. Let me tell you what, I don't really have an opinion on this, besides I do hate when people lose their job. Like, none of us want that to happen. Change is really hard, like Rob said. It's automation. We've seen that happen. I don't want to ride in an AI airplane. I can tell you that much. If that came, an AI pilot, that would just be very frightening. But I do see us trying to figure out, Sandeep said it, universal basic income. What is this automation going to look like and impact our city? It does suck, too, when it takes away jobs, because the investment back into our city, is a driver somewhere out in the middle of the country watching the Waymo and the money's getting stimulated out there? Are people extracting the wealth outside of the city of Seattle? So you think about all those things when automation comes into play.
Yeah. Well, for now, my understanding is Waymos they're legally allowed on freeways, but they're not doing it yet.
Soon to start in San Francisco from downtown to the airport.
To the airport, yeah. So it's ramping up. Rob, you flagged, speaking of transportation, you flagged a Seattle Times story headlined, "Light rail disruptions persist. Should you still ride a train to SeaTac?" Why was that interesting to you?
Well, we had a huge debate, of course, back in the day, deciding whether there should be light rail and where it should run. And I thought that light rail from downtown to the university has always made sense. For example, light rail to the airport, it's there, people use it, which is good. But we already had really good bus service running to the airport that then and now will get you there faster. And it's because rubber-tired vehicles are more flexible, they're redeployable.
But the bus gets there faster than the rail in traffic?
When light rail, yeah, because of the express lane. Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I haven't looked at the data recently, but at the time, the buses would consistently get you there faster because remember, they could run an express bus from downtown to the airport, maybe to have one stop. The light rail has a lot of stops on the way, and so that's just a difference.
You are going to the airport. You can plan ahead.
Yeah, that's true. And look, my
allow some time.
What jumped out at me from the Seattle Times story about light rail disruption, because people are like being late to appointments and job interviews and so forth, is that, quote, when light rail is obstructed, it's hard for riders to adjust, especially since local governments are putting more eggs into the rail basket these days and reducing express buses. And I think that's a mistake. I think because the rail is so capital intensive, this happened in LA too, they cut bus service to fund the light rail, and it really hurt working people and other people who live out in a lower density area like Seattle. So I just think you have to find the right mix. There's a place for rail, absolutely, but don't sacrifice your bus service to provide it because it is still a very effective means of getting people where they need to go.
Save the buses. The G line that we saw in Madison, it was painful for the construction. I know.
It went on forever.
It was like a dog getting neutered without anesthesia. It was terrible, right? It was awful, right?
Just like that.
It was just like that. And now we're watching the J line, over in Eastlake. But that bus ridership has gone up tremendously because it's fast. It runs every 6 minutes. It goes, straight downtown. There's less stops. It's clean. It's accessible. And I think we need to continue that progress in Seattle and not slow down and take away, like Rob said, some of the bus service.
Someone's got to pay for it.
Our car tabs are paying for it. Right?
It's a lot cheaper per rider. You can get it deployed much faster, and when you get a corridor which is so dense that the buses can't move fast enough, that's when you put the fixed rail in.
So does that mean where the rails are in where they are, but so does that mean, for example, you're against light rail to Ballard or West Seattle?
Well, if you look at what it's going to cost to put light rail out to West Seattle, it's going to take resources away from other transit.
Okay, that's 4 shows from now. We're going to solve that. But for now, we've got the clock is ticking. What made us smile this week? I've got to know, Sandeep.
So for me, it's man, for the first time in a long time, I really feel like our neighborhoods in Seattle are showing some, at least the ones I frequent, are really showing some real signs of vitality and life and coming back from the COVID era. Whether it's Pioneer Square where I work, like there was a Seattle Times article earlier this week that talked about a bunch of new businesses in Pioneer Square. There's some influencers that are helping to, and I notice it, right? Pioneer Square feels better than it used to, even very recently. Or, man, go up to where I live in Finney and Greenwood. Oh, Greenwood's hopping, right? 85th and Greenwood is. So that's cool, right? We spend so much time thinking about downtown and downtown vitality and stuff, but our neighborhoods also took a real hit during the last 5 years, and I think we're finally starting to see some energy there.
That was my item, too.
Yeah, it was pretty much the same.
Yeah, same one, because I was just at the Yard near 85th and Greenwood, and then more recently I was at Madrona Arms at 34th and Union. I guess I'm getting to a lot of taverns right now. So maybe that's why I have a smile on my face.
Barfly Rob McKenna.
That's right, exactly. But I was struck at Madrona Arms, up at Madrona Center, that, like, all the families who were there, and it's this place of community, and it was really good to see that.
Counselor? Anything?
I ran into some kids who go to Seattle Central College and just had a great conversation with them and how they were just excited about being in the city, being young, and that gave me hope and love just to hear that their excitement for the city, and they were first-year students.
Excellent, on Capitol Hill.
Tell them to get off my lawn.
Get off Sandeep's lawn. Okay, then mine is going to be hopping on Barfly, Rob McKenna. We're one of the top 10 per capita craft beer brewery states. There was a piece in the Wall Street Journal that begging because beer consumption has fallen, including craft beer. And this writer wants the craft brewers to, number one, abandon the IPA arms race. Craft beer's obsession with hops has gone too far, as what started as a rebellion against blonde lagers has spiraled into a bitter, boozy blur. Most taste like pine resin with a splash of grapefruit pith, and not in a good way. Number two, too high in alcohol content. Beer isn't bourbon. You don't swirl it in a snifter and reflect on your childhood. You drink a few with friends. It's supposed to refresh, not knock you out. Number three, the labels. The industry built its identity on personality with quirky mascots, puns, and inside jokes. It was fun until it became clutter. My beer aisle looks like a vertical Comic-Con merch table. Today's overwhelmed consumer doesn't have time to decode a beer called Sour Me Unicorn Farts or Purple Monkey Dishwasher. Make labels that tell you what's inside, not what's funny at 2 a.m. in the brew house. So much love to our local craft brewers. I bet that's making the rounds. At Wall Street Journal, you can read that. It's called Wacky Labels and Silly Names Are Killing Craft Beer. And I'm frowning because we have to go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joy Hollingsworth, thank you for representing District 3, Seattle City Council. Please come back again.
Will do.
Sandeep Kaushik, come back again if you feel like it. I don't want to impose, but we'd like you if you could. I mean, you podcast at Seattle Nice and Blue City Blues. So why not do a radio show? Would it kill you?
There you go. Get off my lawn, Bill.
Thank you. Rob McKenna, you're too good for us because you were a King County Council member, a state attorney general?
Not at all.
I don't think so.
Not at all. And I recommend we reconvene at the College Inn, which just is about to reopen.
Did it reopen the College Inn? Oh my God!
There's new ownership.
If I had known that, that's so awesome. I love the College Inn.
Kathy Faulkner says we got to go. Sorry, Kathy. Bye, everybody.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books. Gary Steingart discusses his new novel, Vera or Faith, on Wednesday, November 5th at 7 p.m.